Started. My name is Wendy Teeter. I'm the Curator of Archaeology for the Fowler Museum at UCLA, and I'm one of the NAGPRA coordinators for UCLA, and do cultural resource protection for on Catalina Island and working with the communities in Southern California. And I'm very, very, very pleased and delighted to be moderating this panel on cultural and natural resource protection and having some amazing folks here to share with you some of the examples of good native governance within cultural and natural resource protection that they have done. This is by no means to be inclusive of all of California. California is a humongous state. There are more tribes within the state than any other state, and it's representing so many different regions. So we have very specific concerns, very specific histories for all of the tribes here. We, of course, have the largest non-federally recognized communities here as well. So these are three great examples that we hope that you'll learn from and be able to be inspired by. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Reginald Pagaling, who is on the Native American Heritage Commission for the state of California. And we'll be getting along there.
Well, where shall I start? Santa Ynez Reservation is about 2 hours north of here by Santa Barbara. Known as traditional people for both being inland as well as maritime people. I'm a traditional paddler. I'm a boat builder. If we're going to have classifications, I'd put myself at a master boat builder. What does that entail? Because what I've listened to today is not only inspiring, but is also significant from the fact of what good governance is as I relate to it. What I'm going to speak about today is more about the 6.9 acres we've tried to annex right across my reservation. This has been a 13-year process. It's still being fought. I'm going to be old school. I'm going to do handouts. So it still works, and I'll just pass these along. This is just a chronological timeline of the events since 2000, since we submitted our... Okay. They're coming around. But let me get back to my reservation and tell you a bit more about this process that we're going through. Like most reservations, we hit the boom. We jumped onto the gaming opportunity when it showed its face and been a part of it since the 1990s. At one point, we had, what was his name? A famous singer from
Wayne Newton.
Wayne Newton. Gosh, we had a number of jokes about Wayne Newton in our area for a long time. Yeah, the Native American who is also a star who came back to the reservation to do things. And what we discovered in this time frame is not only working with gaming people, the people that had the money, movie stars, we finally got to the point where we decided we're going to do it on our own. That decision came within 6 months after opening our doors. We're buying you guys out, we're going to do it ourselves. We have not looked back. We have gone forward. We have put together our language again. We've actually been working with Professor Applegate up in San Francisco and Berkeley, and we actually have our own native language classes coming back and surviving. We have 5 teachers that we have trained and are training our own people, including not just the youth, but the elders as well, who want to relearn their language. So we're on a pretty good path. We feel pretty good about it. And I believe the last speaker was talking about all those changes that come with leadership. Yeah, that changes. You know, it makes one think with the introspective of whether or not are our leaders just there to be reelected, and get a challenge them. I'm a challenger. Wendy's known me for a long time. When I sat down and talked with Wendy just before I got here, I realized that over the last 2 decades, I've realized that our traditional homelands are about 7,000 acres, covering 5 counties: LA, Santa Barbara, Ventura, San Luis Obispo, and Kern counties. I've walked all of them. Didn't realize that, but there's a calling we all have. Once you realize there's the thread that you have within your culture, that you need to do this. You can't speak it unless you do it. You can't walk the line unless you put the sweat. And so for us as a tribe, just our small little area, I know we struggle. If you've got some of the chronology there since we've started, We have had the local community-based organizations that oppose us, have challenged whether or not we are actually Indians, whether or not we are legitimate as a group, have brought in minions from across the country. Once they're starting to realize they can mobilize, they have mobilized the fearmongers, those that fear what I perceive, minorities progressing to a level that's an equal playing field. It's as plain to me to know that the racists and bigots are out there. You got to bring it out and just say it. Don't beat around the bush, just say it and deal with it. What we're still looking at, and what I think is important for us, is to always look at the outcomes. I think that's something, as I've learned and matured, and Wendy's stumbled with me several times down the road, is you're trying to find an answer. And I'm real happy to kind of come to these conferences again and kind of gather some of that information, what I'm hearing and what I'm listening, is I'm always trying to pick up something along the way that I can bring back to my tribe, is go ahead and challenge them, challenge my leaders. And I think it's important that we move forward in that area. Gosh, 13 years to put 6.9 acres into trust land status. Started in 2000. It's 2014. We're still waiting for a decision. Did I want to ask questions of the man from the Bureau of Indian Affairs? Yes! But there's a right time and a right place for everything. I'm not going to get the answer here. I'm not going to, maybe I'd like to get a peek into it. But absolutely, the process allows the non-Indian community, in just the application process, when you petition the federal government. Gosh, the federal government. Gosh, I've heard that so much, and I'm laughing because I just heard so many great stories about people looking at I'm part of it, but I'm also part of the problem. And when you look at that and hear that, you realize we've made something and created something that has such a two-headed monster that allows people, and if some of you have seen this stuff, I don't think I need to repeat off what's on the page. If you want to ask questions, you'll find me and ask me questions. But I think it's important you realize that we have to move forward in the same process that says good governance is one that allows us to fall down and make our mistakes. It's one that allows us to realize there are people here that really don't want us here. I remember speaking at one of our very first County Board of Supervisors meeting about our property. I spoke to the supervisors with a blessing in my language. Halfway through it, one of our good neighbors spoke up and said, "Speak English, speak American." The best thing I have ever heard. I got quoted in the paper, says, "You know what? That's the first time Americans have ever probably said in a county room, in a county hearing, real American language is spoken." I appreciate that reporter saying that. Somebody got it. Somebody got it. And all I was saying is, thank you for allowing me this time. All I was saying. Nothing critical, nothing rude, and I told him that. So they're there. But I know that we are moving forward. I know some of you know our legal liaison, Sam Cohen. Sam's been dealing with Native American issues for such a long time. Out of Seattle, tracked his whole background. And one of the favorite things we have was Sam's Jewish. Please don't disrespect any Jewish people here. I always call him my favorite Jew mash, because we're shoe mash. and those of you that know him, that are attorneys, will laugh with him. And he's really a favorite guy, friend of mine. And he has shown me many things, particularly in this process here. He's been with us this entire time, and he's really a surprising individual that comes across to us in a way with a passion, and that's what I appreciated. I don't remember the other attorney with the beard speaking his name today. Yeah. Just like Sam. I mean, I can appreciate someone who's going to come in, plaid shirt, blue jeans. I can relate to you because you actually know what your work's about. I can appreciate it because you've been with Native people. We know, Marshall and I, all of us have gone through in our blue jeans being comfortable in a meeting. It's a challenge all the way. I don't want to go ahead and just continue conversations just about the 13 acres. Just need to let you know that I think my message to you is we're here. We have done that. We're still in this process. It's a travesty. It does things to us as tribal people, because not only when I mentioned to you do we get challenged as Native Americans, then the thread goes down to me, to my child. My daughter's here today. She came up from Cal State Long Beach. Say hi, Eva. But anyway, it's just one of those things that I know my children hear that stuff. My grandchildren hear that stuff. When it gets put in the papers, and it is so difficult to be in your own community when you have the person across from you whom you believe is your ally in community development, an ally in working towards a community. And I look at these people who are with you when their child is in school or high school, and they want you, the tribe, to help support the program, and once their child graduates, what the hell do those people want? The second the spoon is pulled out of their mouth, or they can't participate in part of the silver spoon, it's done. You're not helping my family. You're not helping my kid. You're not helping my grandchild. I don't give a damn about you. Is that helping the rest of the community? No. And I think the last thing I want to bring forward, as I saw the person that was talking about the sacred site, whether or not you were going to go ahead and put a yeah, the ski resort. And I was just thinking of a site that I just came from back home. It's called Napamu, the ascending site. And the question came about, do you think by putting a reservoir at the bottom of your site is going to disrupt it? Yes. But physically it's not touching your site. Yes. You create an opportunity for people to walk in, to enjoy your reservoir, who want to look down on your reservoir from our site. You create opportunities to let people desecrate an area that wasn't supposed to be desecrated, without them understanding. And for me, I look at this as not just the challenge of one of our biggest opponents in the valley. I mean, guys, land rich, hash poor. It will not sell to anybody that has any knowledge of the reservation or is from the reservation. I can't touch a piece of his land. But he just recently had a prayer pole put up on that site. And and maybe throughout many of the other California communities, prayer poles mean something very significant to us. They're usually symbolic of perhaps a lost one, or you're wishing for something. And records show, as the mission records show, that throughout our valleys along the coast, prayer poles were used for navigational locations as you're traveling up and down the coast, or they're to give you a perspective. Most of the time on our prayer areas, it's a place for us to go there and just sit on top and enjoy it. And I took a couple of people up there the other day, and it just came back to me and says, yeah, we don't want this. We don't understand. There's not a necessity to build a reservoir here. You need to let at least this place be, because there's so many sacred sites that we no longer have access to. It's important we at least keep those and try to have access to them. And I think the final outcome for me was to just say, we need access to your site 4 times a year. Thank you for saying you're sensitive. I mean, I remember that statement he gave to me. He was a sensitive person. But it was humorous, because the explanation I gave to him and to the anthropologist was the fact that our religion, our spirituality, is always a balance for humanity, for me, for you, and your children. That's all we've really had. That is our role. As a Shumash person, I know we protect the Western Gate, which all souls go through from every tribe. And the honesty about this, as much as this guy disliked me, he had problems and he fell into the river, I'd be one of the first people down there to pull him out. Because that's what we do. That's our role. I believe that wholly. I believe that every Native American has that. And I would never and I think I mentioned this to Wendy the other day. Never let a fence or a sign stop me from going up to practice my religion, nor would I ever criticize anybody for going on to private property, because private property is not us. We are part of the land. We are part of a balance. We keep that balance and that continuum going. And I find that thread common to each and every Native American tribe here and indigenous tribe in other countries. We have a balance. And that's the beauty of it. And as I get older, I'm finally starting to discover it is really cool. How nice it is to be there. So I'm going to wrap this up with just that. I think we have a balance to go. We're moving along in the right direction. I'm really comfortable where we're going. We have our battle like many tribes. We don't get the opportunities, the fair shake, but we move forward. And as I said, when we started paddling, when I started building boats, it wasn't part of our tribe. It was part of a collection of both non-federally recognized tribe members and myself. And we brought it back. It's part of us now. Muktamai is the name of our boat. It's a 30-foot vessel, a 30-foot plank canoe, the largest I know of in North America. And in our language, it's the house of the sea. And we believe that. And so I want to thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Wendy. Next, Marcus Guerrero is going to be speaking. He's from United Auburn in Rancheria and with the Tribal Historic Preservation Office.
Yes, thank you. As Wendy mentioned, my name is Marcus Guerrero, and I'm here representing the United Auburn Indian community of the Auburn Rancheria, specifically Jason Camp, who's the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer. I'm not a tribal member. I work as staff for the tribe. My family's background is from Jalisco. But Jason, he's a Miwok Nisenan from Auburn. So I'd like to thank Wendy and the rest of these panelists that I have the privilege to be sitting here with. I'm going to be talking about the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer's role and what that is. Basically, the TIPO role within a tribe is somebody that looks over the cultural and natural resources. Where they're at within the tribal government structure depends on the tribe. You have your tribal council, and a branch of the tribal council is the Tribal Historic Preservation Committee, and so the TIPO works as an advisor to the committee, and the committee in turn works as an advisor to the tribal council. So the TIPO, in accordance to the National Historic Preservation Act, is a designated tribal official for a federally recognized tribe that deals with tribal and historical preservation. The TIPO is responsible for the administration of any and all functions that the State Historic Preservation Officer has, but specifically on tribal lands, meaning they have all oversight, review, and concurrence authority on tribal lands. The role is split between two different functions. Internally, the TIPO deals with historic preservation and project review, which is specific to the tribe. So historic preservation could deal with anything from language revitalization to basket makings in the case of Auburn, and project review, housing projects, consultant projects that come in from outside of the service area. And then externally, what the TIPO does is he works as a government consultant for the tribe. So he's been designated by the tribe and by the National Park Service to carry out a preservation plan for the tribe. And so he does have signature authority, but we give that signature authority to the tribal council. And so the other function is environmental review and compliance process off tribal lands. So that's kind of what I want to focus on, is more of the administrative role of the TIPO, not necessarily what actions they do to try to preserve the language and stuff like that. Because it's not my place to talk about that, but I'll just talk a little bit more about the administrative process. So one of the first things that the TIPO had to do was they had to designate their land, right? So if you look at the red boundary, that identifies the tribe's ancestral or aboriginal territory or lands. And then the blue hatched area represents the tribe's service area, which includes 6 counties. And so the tribe's reservation lands are in the city of Auburn as well as in the city of Sheridan, which they're not shown there, but like I mentioned, the TIPO has full responsibilities for historic preservation on tribal lands and off tribal lands. They have review and oversight authority for development or environmental review projects. So as many of you may know or may not know, the tribes, they receive a ton of mail. You know, anybody that has to deal with this knows that, you know, we deal with stacks of mail that come in every day. So what we've done is we've created a number of databases that allow us to try to streamline this process. Yeah, the TIPO and his staff, which is part of our department, which includes myself and Melody McAdams, who does our GIS and NAGPRA work, is what we do is we go through these letters and we categorize them, you know, through numbers so that we're able to automate this process. And so here's kind of a list of the projects that we've come up with and that we've dealt with. You know, they deal mostly with SB 18, CEQA, and Section 106, as well as NAGPRA. So when we get these letters in, we just put these little numbers in, give them over to Melody, and they spit out these nice little letters. And so we have to go in and add, you know, project-specific information to the letters, but it makes it streamlined. We also take advantage of the tribe's Tribal Historic Resource Information System, which is a database that includes all of the tribe's known natural and cultural resources. And what we do then is that we review cultural resources survey reports that includes archaeological, biological, historical, you know, talking with the elders and stuff like that. And then we check for errors in the information. So a lot of times consultants or agencies have gone to the state repositories and done record searches and have come up with, you know, these are your concerns, these are what's been identified. So what we found is that a number of resources that are known often do not get updated at the state clearinghouse. Externally, what the TIPO does is works with various local, state, and federal governments to come up with sensitivity maps that we can use to provide these government agencies for things like general plans or specific plans, or in this case, it's a sewer project that was being carried out by Placer County. And so if you can see that red alignment there, that big red bubble right there, that was a number of burials that were identified along an alignment that was for a water line. And the irrigation district that was managing it did a record search, didn't find anything. But when they consulted with us, we were able to show them that there was a number of resources that were there that didn't come up. And those are the types of resources that haven't been updated by the state that are in the NAGPRA collections. So NAGPRA is the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. So as part of the Salvage Act, a number of burials were removed in the 1960s, and the state still hasn't gone through and updated their, their files to include this type of information. So in our toolbox, like I mentioned, we have all the CRIS data, which is the California Historical Resources Information System, and we included the NAGPRA data. We've also included things like historic maps, ethnographical data, predictive modeling, and field collection. Here's an example of a general land office plat from the 19th century. So what we do is we get a project area of potential effect or a project boundary. We overlay that onto our GIS, and then we go through all these independent layers to see what we can come up with. Here's an example of an ethnographic map from, I think, Little John that was done in the 1930s, I believe. But it identifies a number of locations that the ethnographer was able to locate in consultation with some of the elders in the community. And we've also gone through and looked at various notes like C. Hart's Merriam's notes, as well as J.P. Harrington. And so what we've done is we've been able to identify which village locations correspond to which families. The United Auburn Indian community consists of about 8 major lineages. So we've been able to identify which families belong to which villages, so that when there are discoveries, we know which family to work with to make sure that those items are properly treated and disposed of. We also do predictive modeling. I know this is not the best thing to do, but it's helped us identify potential resource locations in different places like saddles or ridges or in valley floors, besides just the sites that are located along the riverways. And finally, I guess what we do is, we have to go out into the field and verify some of these site reports or survey reports. This is an example of a quarry project where we were told that there was no resources along this creek, So we took our crews down there, had the opportunity to survey the creek, and we hit about 7 sites that they were denying us that were not there. So I guess one of the important things about this that I didn't get to touch on again was the heritage preservation, right? Was the revitalization or the projects that we have to reify the culture. That's, I guess, is better said by some of the tribal members than myself, as well as the consultation that we carry out with other tribes. I think that's important to understand is that, you know, tribes these days are very open to sharing information. We have the privilege of having Yocha Dehe next to United Auburn, and you know, it's been great to be able to work with the tribe and to share information with them, to share agreement documents, and to be able to, you know, to work on projects collectively. What United Auburn has done is if there is a discovery or if there's a need to treat and dispose of any artifacts or human remains, they work with the local federally recognized or non-federally recognized tribe to have them monitor and treat and dispose of their folks properly. And so that's kind of the approach that the committee and that the TIPO's taken. I think the biggest advantage for the TIPO is for those tribes that have federal lands in trust that are conducting, you know, development projects or any types of projects, because the TIPO gets full authority on tribal lands, so they can determine, you know, what is eligible or not eligible, and they can ascribe the appropriate mitigation. So if, say, you're building houses or you're building a racetrack, it's easier to comply with environmental law when your own, you know, tribal member is sitting there making the decisions for you instead of having the state or some other entity make those decisions for you. And so I just wanted to end my presentation with a brief video. This last year, the Preservation Committee was awarded the Governor's Historic Preservation Award. So I guess this is something that the tribe wrote up. So I guess I'll give you a chance to see some of the tribal members and to hear some of their own words.
The 2013 California Governor's Historic Preservation Awards were presented on November 21st at Leland Stanford Mansion State Historic Park in Sacramento. There were a total of 11 individuals, organizations, projects, or programs that received awards. What follows is the presentation made at the award ceremony about one of the 2013 award winners. United Auburn Indian Community Tribal Historic Preservation Committee. The United Auburn Indian Community of the Auburn Rancheria, or UAIC, is a federally recognized tribe comprised of both Miwok and Southern Maidu, or Nisenan, people, whose tribal lands are within Placer County and whose ancestral territory spans into El Dorado, Nevada, Sacramento, Sutter, and Yuba counties. The UAIC, through its Tribal Historic Preservation Committee, Preservation Office, and Tribal Historic Preservation Officer, or TIPO, has pioneered innovative methods of applying state and federal laws and programs to protect cultural resources. Their focus has been on increasing public awareness of Native peoples and places and making these cultural resources available to contemporary Native communities. The committee developed a tribal historic preservation plan emphasizing the importance of site protection and consultation with elders and spiritual leaders possessing special knowledge of tribal and cultural traditions. Other key elements of the plan include the use of conservation easements to ensure tribal access to traditional resources, such as gathering areas and sacred sites. The committee also takes an active role in community outreach, including an annual Tribal Preservation and Monitor training workshop that teaches participants about cultural traditions and protection of Native lands and resources. In 2012, and again in 2013, the UAIC hosted statewide tribal summits on preservation and intergovernmental consultation issues. TIPOs, tribal members, and agency partners came together at the summits to discuss and share perspectives on consultation and how tribal communities can most effectively utilize Senate Bill 18, the California Environmental Quality Act, and Section 106 review processes. The UAIC and its Tribal Historic Preservation Committee have established exemplary preservation efforts that will benefit present and future generations of their and other tribal communities, as well as all Californians.
I think that's good there. Yeah,
Congratulations to all the winners of the 2000.
Yep, thank you.
And so for our last sort of formal presentation, we have Chairman Marshall McKay from Yocha, Dehe, Wintun Nation, and he'll provide opening remarks. He's also chairman of our California Native Heritage Commission and of the Autry National Center. So, Chairman McKay.
Thank you, Wendy. Ikun mi Bisay. Nano yet Recto. Yocha Dehe Cell. My name is Marshall McKay. How are you? I'm from Yocha Dehe. Yocha Dehe is the name of where I belong. The village by the spring water. I'm very happy to be here today, and I'm happy that Wendy sought me out and rekindled our friendship again and asked me to participate in this panel because sharing in this discussion is very important, I think, to our tribes like ours here on the panel. You know, I've heard some very interesting things today, and it's inspired me to keep it on, as Reggie says, in this whole pursuit. We all know that state and federal laws are hardly enough on their own to protect and preserve our ancestral lands, our sacred places, and artifacts from the progress of development. As North American indigenous people, we have too often witnessed the destruction of parts of our heritage and history, and when through cooperation and communication, much of that damage could have been avoided. Yocha Dehe is committed to doing things to alter this course of action in practical, proactive, and productive ways. First of all, we do not want to simply stand in the way of development, creating anger, resentment, and bitterness. The population is growing here in California. We're nearing 50 million people, and we understand development is inevitable. Our goal is to work as partners with public and private agencies in order to operate with mutual respect for critical cultural value and practices. We also want to work with them early on to explore potential issues. We also we think that helps mitigate problems efficiently. And we would like to look for solutions that enable projects to move forward while protecting what is sacred to Native peoples. And by working with and not against, we hope to convey a sense of understanding that the history of Native people is important and the land is sacred to us. I'm encouraged to report that our efforts are achieving some positive results. Sensitive sites are being protected, and projects are moving forward. More and more frequently, those undertaking projects are coming to us early in process, asking for consultations and assistance at the point when success is most attainable and least disruptive. I'd like to share a couple of specific cases with you today. One is involved in the development of a public recreation area in Vallejo, California called Glen Cove. It's on the Carquinez Straits, not far from San Francisco. And the second one is a flood protection project that's in the city of Vacaville that's closer to Yocha Dehe. But as we were shown before on these maps of regions, tribal territories are respected amongst tribes. So when we started to work on this Glen Cove project, the tribe came into it fairly late, and we were alerted to it by protesting groups that were exposing the sites even as they were trying to protect them. And they were having confrontation with the city government in Vallejo, and that was causing problems with the police department and with various other agencies. And so we decided that something had to be done because we could see that this site was being televised on it was televised, it was on the radio, it was in the newspapers. Inadvertently, these people that were trying to protect the site were exposing the site, and that was a problem. Some of them were I think, earnest about it, and some of the people in the group were perhaps there for publicity or some other purpose. But when we got involved, we went through a TIPO process too, and we decided that the tribe should have some authority over preserving this site because it is our people. And as you saw on the map there, we do have delineation of territory. So we called upon 2 other Wintun tribes to join us in this fight and to try something new because the sensitive site was just being overrun, and we started out discussing this issue with the city of Vallejo. Our tribal council talked to them, and we were kind of going nowhere. You know, there wasn't any legal basis to determine ownership or right. No tribe had ever gone into challenge a municipality and a recreational park division of that municipality before, so it was really unknown territory. And as we did that, we decided we were kind of limited. The law wasn't on our side. The law was actually leaning towards the city side. So we looked at the UN Declaration of Indigenous People and decided that would be a good platform for our challenge. And we didn't use it as a enforcement document. We looked at it as turning it around and saying, as human beings, we have inherent human rights, not only as tribal people, but human people. And we want to use the Declaration, and we chose about 3 or 4 articles to stand on, and we challenged the government of the city of Vallejo on those grounds, and that gave them some leverage to move away from the criminal and civil codes of California and the city of Vallejo to work with us, to start a negotiation. Now, I think it was about 9 months of work with the city of Vallejo when we came to the production of a cultural easement between Yocha Dehe and the city of Vallejo. And that easement, I believe it was one of the first in the state, protected the site. It gave Yocha Dehe the right to inspect and preserve that area into perpetuity. That land now is guarded by us. The city is bound to report to us any damage or destruction or invasion. During the process, there was one contractor that sort of put his middle finger up to us and said, you know, I have a job to do, we're doing it, and the city fired them on the spot. So there is adherence to this path, and I think, you know, in moving in that kind of direction, it gives the TIPOs, it gives the tribes, it gives us a little bit more authority to challenge and prevail in some of these situations where we couldn't before, or we felt we couldn't before. You know, and I've stood by Reggie shoulder to shoulder on his issue down there too, you know, offering support, and I said if you needed somebody to fight for you, I'd be there too. So far, he's done a good job of taking care of those putzes in Santa Barbara, but it's those kinds of attitudes and those kinds of persistence that get our issues noticed. And it really is that. It's not any more than that. You know, as the professor spoke this afternoon about a place in time, a place in history. There is that, I believe, and I don't know why it is, but it just is. There's a indigenous people of the world are being called up, I think, to stand up for ourselves. And what the Assistant Secretary said, I believe in, and we've believed in at Yocha Dehe for a decade. You know, we can do it better than Washington, D.C. can do it. We know what we're looking at. We know what's good for our citizens at home. We know what we want for our children growing up. We want what elements in their education we want to develop and put cultural aspects into that format. So I encourage all of the tribal leaders and all the tribal citizens here today to take that to heart and really influence your tribal leadership to move forward in that vein. You know, we have been a dependent society, and we need to remove our dependency on the federal government. And that's one of these. That's part of this whole process at Yocha Dehe, is to take those kinds of things, instead of turning it over to the federal government or to the state government and saying, protect our place, please. We didn't do that. We did it ourselves through a mechanism that was just brand new to us. This UN declaration had only been signed about a year by the United States, so it was something that was completely new, and I do believe that was to an advantage also. It put the city of Vallejo on their heels because they didn't know what to do with it. And it gave us an advantage to push through, and I think it is a document that can be very, very much utilized in tribal trials against neighborhoods and cities around us that resist us in growing our nations and in growing our governments and developing and preserving our sacred sites, because most of the people don't know that, you know, most of the highways in this state were trails before they were highways, and they're there because they were the most efficient way to get around, and people died on those trails, people lived on those trails. There are sacred sites everywhere in this state, and you know, I don't know them all here in Los Angeles, but I rely on local people to tell me. I rely on United Auburn to work cooperatively with Yocha Dehe in the north to share information about sacred sites. I know if we find something that's close to their territory, you know, Marcos is notified immediately, and we get on it and we try to figure out how to protect it as fast as we can, and they do the same. And we're starting to get this attitude going across the state, where the TIPOs, I think, are growing to about 80 now, or 60, something like that. You know, so the tribes are getting excited about watching over their own sacred sites and their own cultural artifacts and possessions. And as Reggie pointed out earlier, you know, a lot of these places are places just to go and watch the sunrise and to pray and to be when you're happy or sad. And if we don't have those places, then how do we get that message out? How do we get that out of our bodies? We don't, and that hurts our psychology. It hurts our economics. It hurts everything. So, and we can't teach our children where to go. It changes the culture. So that's why these places are so important, and these systems are so important to set up, so we can be cooperative together. Because I agree with Marcos. The information that the state holds, again, that was set up to supply to the contractors working in the forests and working around municipalities that, no, there aren't any sites. Just go ahead and bulldoze it. You know, move forward. But now we're having the opportunities as tribal leaders and tribal citizens to say, no, there's places here that cannot be run over with a bulldozer, even if there's a forest fire. We're holding you back. You can't do that. Let it burn. You know, it won't hurt it if it burns, but it will hurt it if you drive a D8 on it and scrape up the ground. So I think the idea of cooperation, the idea of sharing information and talking to one another is vital. It's something that we cannot stop doing. And so if you can use the declaration to your advantage, please do. And I'm sure that Wendy can dig up a copy of the declaration. But everybody should.
Yeah, there's somebody like Angela Riley who might know a few things about Union Grove.
Exactly. So I think those are quite important issues to know and rely on those resources. And I'd be happy to talk to you if you have a comment or a question on if the UNDRIP might be of value to your dilemma. So it was a positive result in Vallejo where the artifacts and the sacred sites are now preserved, and the people of Vallejo got their part. So everybody can enjoy that part of Carquinez that is sacred to us, but it's also open to the public because it's a beautiful part of the river, it's a beautiful part of the land there, and to take it away from the city, I think would have been a travesty too, because then that way we wouldn't have been able to use it either. So at this point we can have ceremony there, we can allow other tribes to have ceremonies there, and all of there was no destruction to the site, so there was no building of bathrooms or trails are directed away from that site, and no one is bothering it. And I'm thankful for living in the United States of amnesia, because I think people will forget what's in that site and leave it alone. And then we also have some legal assistance if they don't. So that worked out very well for us, and it was pretty swift. We needed to solve this fast because the protesters were drawing attention. Like I said, the police were going to arrest them. There were going to be a big confrontation and more acknowledgement about the area. And we were able to disperse that group. We were able to settle the problem and take control over the land. So we're now guardians of that property and those sites for a while. The other project that we're working on, it's a current project, it's ongoing, it's called Alamo Creek Basin. It's in the city of Vacaville in Solano County. And this project has garnered the attention of the federal government through FEMA and through the Army Corps of Engineers, the state government through CalEMA, which is the Emergency Management Agency, the city of Vacaville, and Yocha Dehe's tribal government. We've been involved in this process from almost the beginning. In 2009, we were noticed of two sensitive discoveries in this project, and significant discoveries. 20,000-year-old site, and this was in a, I don't know why this site hadn't been desecrated. It might have been protected by the owner. It could have been protected by its geographic position. It's in a very remote area. But the city of Vacaville wanted to mitigate a flood system because they built part of the city in a swamp, and the natural drainage from the mountains runs right through their housing development. So their engineers were asleep, I think. But so they experienced a huge flood, and so the mayor had people in his office screaming at him. And they wanted to mitigate this problem, so they thought about building a dam upstream, and where they wanted to do it turned out to be a very significant village site. And so we were noticed, and we do have a good relationship with the city government. And when FEMA got involved, I got a little paranoid. I thought, well, I don't know this guy so much. He has a foreign accent. I don't trust him. He turned out to be a pretty good partner because he did. I'd almost had a complete MOU to go ahead with this project, and in the last 11th hour, the FEMA guy decided to look at the MOA one more time and decided that it didn't give the tribe enough authority. So he put a hold on it, and we're in the process now of straightening that out and determining that the tribe will have more oversight on the project before it goes ahead. And I think that I had never experienced that before, but it was refreshing in that sense. And so, these kinds of projects, the tribe isn't opposed to. These are good for the entire area. Flood mitigation is a good idea. Like, we're working on several projects at home on how to mitigate runoff if it ever rains again, runoff and preserving water in the natural surrounding canyons. So we're on the same page as far as trying to prevent flooding. So we know how important to the city it is. But basically, I think what I've learned from this is that the cooperative approach has been effective in resolving some of these difficult issues. Now, we haven't always had the opportunity to be cooperative because we didn't get notice in time, so we would be the last ones to learn about projects. We would discover that our artifacts and human remains were already boxed up and sent off to some university or other place, museum too, or held in the coroner's office or someplace where they shouldn't be. And now we're starting to get ahead of the project. We're starting to be notified in the initial stages of projects and through the help of organizations like United Auburn's program and our program at Yocha Dehe. People are agencies and private companies are sending us correspondence, asking us for consultation. And they're giving us the respect, I think, that we have, because in my experience, we're actually building a more complete database than the state of California, because we have the tribal input. Some of we don't give that input to the state because it's sacred to us. So now I assume in a few years the state will be coming to us too to access our data and get advice where they can work and where they can do projects. And I think, and that's a great deal, because when I go to these TIPO meetings and I meet these people that are interested in preserving their heritage and their culture, it's warming to my heart, because I know there's other people out there thinking about the same thing. They want control over their histories. They want control over their tribal property, and they want their rights back. That's our property. And I'm sure if anybody started digging up the military graveyard next door to school here, there'd be somebody over there protesting, And so we want to do the same thing. We don't want our sacred burial grounds desecrated or in any way diminished from their quality to our culture. So again, I would do the same thing as Reg. If you guys have questions, please get a hold of me, and I'll try to answer them further. But I don't want to take up any more time. But this is a very important issue to all of us on this panel. We're preserving our culture, and we're proud to do that. And we're frustrated it's taken so long to have some authority in this action. So bear with us. You'll probably see us standing on the governor's desk or something in the future. But that's what you got to get used to.
Go to jail too?
I'll go to jail.
I'll wait for you.
Okay. Reg will have bail money. Thank you.
So we have some time for questions. I just wanted to make one small comment, and that is to thank Curator from the Tongva community for being here, and Rudy Ortega from the Tataviam tribe. I have been very fortunate to be so welcomed within Indian country in California especially, and to work with such wonderful communities. And I just wanted to give a small shout out to the fact that it's not always, as you can see from our panel, it's not just about one tribal community in California. It's a very united community. I've been very privileged to work with them on getting together, and those who have TIPOs bring their TIPO departments, but those who have cultural directors, historic officers, elders, the person who was left standing in front of the line when it came to cultural resources, that's the way California is, and everybody comes together. And one of the hardest parts that I've noticed in the time that I have worked with the community has been that there is such a high turnover rate that by the time you get someone in that does a good job, they've moved on. Or you've done all your due diligence and you've trained the federal officer, you've trained that land use and planning officer, and then they've moved on. So there's such a learning curve that by working together to brainstorm a lot of these issues, we can figure out whether there's an impediment with a person, there's an officer who just doesn't know what they're doing within a federal agency or a state agency, or whether or not the law is broken and we need then tribal attorneys and other people to fix that law or to work on that issue, or whether it's some other reason. But it's only within having the communities actually talking together, the tribal officers and the people who are doing it on the front line, talking and bringing their best in there, and they even let archaeologists in too sometimes, that we can sort of figure out what the problem is and then work together to solve it. And it's been such a privilege and such a pleasure to work with them. And with that, I wanted to make sure that I'm sure you guys had lots of questions. So this is not obviously going anywhere but inside there. So I have to hand it to you anyway. Dina?
Thank you. My question is for you, Marshall. Actually, I have a bunch of questions, but I won't take up all of that time. But I'm really curious as to how UNDRIP was deployed and what specific articles were referred to. And it seems that it would be the free, prior, and informed consent clause. But I wonder if there was more than that, and how the Vallejo City Council received that. I remember when that whole Glen Cove thing was going on, and it was such a big deal in the media, but then it went away. And so this is all news to me.
We actually used Article 8 and 11, 25, 26, 31, 32, and you know, because those all fit into the criteria that we were looking for, and by analyzing the UNDRIP's articles, the tribe decided those were the ones that would be most effective and the most relevant to our plan at that point to try to develop a cultural easement. And the second part, you had a second part of that question. And how did the city council?
Yeah, how they received it. I mean, it seemed like they were pretty open to it.
They received it with open arms because they didn't have any other alternative to solving the issue other than arresting everybody and, you know, causing a lot of media attention on them. And you know, at that point, Vallejo didn't have a lot of financial resources either. So they didn't, their police department was small, and I think they were very open to having a solution brought to that didn't really cause a great economic drain on them or give them bad publicity in that sense, in a citywide sense. So they were pretty progressive about wanting to work together and not being resistant to this kind of easement proposition. So we were happy about that, because we didn't know either. You know, we thought, well, it's either that or litigate, and litigation is expensive and timely. So we didn't want to do that either, but that was our only course.
This is one I'll just ask of everybody. There are a lot of grad students and a lot of researchers here at this conference, and I guess what we would sort of like to foster and to know from you is what kinds of research do you need done? How could the University of California continue to assist you with some of the new and up-and-coming students, the people who are looking at things with fresh ideas? How can we work in concert with each of you, with all of you, to serve you on these types of issues?
I don't know. From Yocha Dehe's perspective, I think we would probably need to consult on projects that are coming up and see where you could help. I'm sure there are assets we could use, but I wouldn't know them off the top of my head without some direct conversation with the department, and that's what I want to try to foster too, is coming into the department a little bit more and seeing what's available. I don't know. That's why I can't answer the question. If I know your assets and I know where the passion lies within the department, I think I can answer that a little bit more clearly. But you know, we're dealing with a lot of smart people, so we need smart people too, and so I appreciate the opening up the conversation for that.
Just wondered if there were particular fields that, you know, just in a general sense, that you could foresee being of value, research in those areas.
Humanity. I would say, it's got to be particular projects. I mean, we're always coming across different tasks. We have an internal school within our casino in which we try to select potential employees, hopefully descendants. We try to give them priority in gearing them up into business mode, into all aspects of business mode. And as we get into separate projects, I know that we look for, or at least I look for, different sources of information in which we can hopefully make a rational decision. Sometimes we get information on, what's a recent project? Compressed gas, compressed gas stations, and looking at that, whether or not that's feasible for us. So having no knowledge of it. So when you say it's worthwhile to maybe look at some grad students, well, there's some projects and we end up assigning it, so we really don't know what we're really looking at. Sometimes we get to the point is one person from this department's looked at it and they're advising everybody else. Well, as we grow, as we get to the stage of development and understanding it, we're obviously grasping for more resources to make much more of an informed decision. So when you say which disciplinary, pretty much all of them. Which one? Timing's everything. We're not sure which one at which time. We're always dealing with law. We're always dealing with law. That never goes away. Deal with our sacred sites. We're dealing with health issues. We're dealing with casino issues. I neglected to make one real, I think, valid point, because numbers never lie. I chair our local Indian Benefits Committee, and it's to mitigate impacts which the casino operation has, or our enterprise operation have. And that's what I look at, enterprise operations, because we've expanded beyond the casino. We have 2 hotels and a restaurant, and we have some other properties that we have, and they're holdings. So now we're at level of trying to understand those dynamics, but we have always made sure we take care of the first responders' priorities. We put together in our community probably whatever the number is, and just pull it out of the air, $40,000 to run first responders for just our community, say within the first 15 miles, it costs $40,000. We put that $40,000 up, we average less than 25% of the calls. But we put out for that for the community because it's our community, period. So that's just the example of I think tribes, as a thread, as a common thread, what I stated early on, is we care about humanity. It's not so much about the progress, it's about the whole community as a whole. Once people start to grasp that, and I think that's with the initial whole thing with the governance, tribes doing it on their own, taking care of the community on the whole, progress will proceed. Because mainstream still comes up with the concept it's me, my profit, I'm going forward, and I'm going to make good things for my family. What about the other families? That's the question they have to face. It's not the question we're going to face. So yeah, we need your help.
How about getting Robert Bettinger removed from the UC system? Maybe you guys could work on that.
Oh, Yate. Shanana. I'm Amber Crotty with Dehe Policy Institute, and we're based out of Dehe College, which is the Navajo Nation Tribal College. One thing that we're looking into is the protection of cultural knowledge. And I know we talked more about like space and objects, but I'm curious on how you're going to address your own cultural knowledge. And at this point, we really haven't found areas that we can use either case law or rules or regulations. We don't want to go through the copyright process, but we do want to protect our own sacred knowledge. So if you can just share, maybe there's been instances where you feel that your knowledge then has been used inappropriately, or other entities have tried to kind of, for the most part, it's like medicinal purposes. Companies will come in and use our knowledge to provide medicine or remedies, and then want to reap like the financial reward. Like they'll alter it and then be able to make a copyright. But so that's kind of my question of you.
Gosh, you have a tough question.
I know. Gee, was that directed at me? That's a good question, because as we advance, we may have to go into trademark and copyright, simply because it's known worldwide. Our tribes and our culture may take on a brand. I'm not sure, because there's so much. So a lot of people just use the words tribal or Cherokee. Jeep puts it on a car. I don't know. Those are some of the questions that do bear some thought about. How do we protect that? How do we protect it from someone else using it? I know that there was one case at Shingle Springs where somebody did try to say they were Shingle Springs or something, and it took litigation to quell this issue. So that's something in business management or legal that we should be looking at, because Reg's tribe and mine, we're revitalizing our language, and we worry about that because we publish children's books for the kids to practice and read with, and at some point somebody could reproduce that and say it's theirs. So there are those kinds of concerns that we are thinking about. But to answer your question specifically, we do, at Yocha, we do have a brand for our food products, our wine and olive oil, and it is trademarked. It is copywritten. And we've already had one incident where somebody tried to use our label, and we had to threaten them with litigation. So I don't know to the degree of what you're trying to protect, but you may have to resort to some of the legal forms.
Yeah, the question obviously raises several questions, because I think it was just a few years ago, OP did a bunch of flip-flops. There were rock art flip-flops. So yeah, they use it throughout Santa Barbara. They use shoemash rock art on many of the designs leading to off-ramps and freeways. So it continues to be that trend. Is it respectful? Not sure. I know there's a whole mural in Santa Barbara that depicts the mission record period that shows Native Americans as slaves. Is it hurtful? I think it is. Is it art? Probably. You know, where's the fine line in all this? It gets to be pretty rough. But yeah, there's probably in areas that you talk about cultural protection. Don't think I've come across it very often. Not in my area that I'm really familiar with. It just sticks out. Now, is it preservation? Well, you can ask my daughter. I've sang to her since she was in vitro with mama. So I make sure that my knowledge is going to be passed on, and she can be passed on when she gets kids. So yeah, I'm making sure that thread passes on.
I think at the project level, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services has tried to identify what they call TEKs, traditional ecological knowledge, and I think these are some of the biggest problem areas that we have right now, and that places like the Advisory Council for Historic Properties is looking at. You know, what is a traditional cultural property? What is a traditional cultural landscape? You know, where do these elements all combine into one? Because we're stuck arguing for place when we want to protect the plants, we want to protect the fish, we want to protect the medicines, right? And so, yeah, I mean, I think, you know, there's some guidance like Bulletin 38 that the National Park Service puts out. There's Preservation Brief 36, but I think a lot of tribes have had to develop their own resolutions or their own ordinances that say, you know, this is what we think is sacred. You know, this is what we think is important for us, because, you know, we constantly get challenged to where we go out there with tribal members so that we can identify plants and sacred, you know, sites or objects, and they'll bring a geologist from Berkeley, you know, a lawyer from UCLA. And so, you know, by this point, it's, you know, 3 or 4 of us that are arguing against these academics or against these people about plants and animals when the federal law only protects these places. So I think, you know, what you're saying is very important, and it's a topic that right now is being discussed at, you know, at the DC level.
Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Just as a follow-up, unfortunately, Laura Miranda couldn't be here today because she was going to speak about her own case that just got wrapped up at Pechanga, where they were trying to protect a sacred mountain. And that mountain had already been recorded by ethnographers. And so they put forward that information to try to protect it. And then the opposition found another anthropologist to try to argue against the tribe for their own creation story. So
she works for the Advisory Council.
Yeah, and she does work. She's on the Advisory Council, so ACHP. So it's too bad she couldn't be here, but you can always ask her. And thank you all for coming. Thank you, Marshall and Reggie and Marcus, for being here, and have a great day.
Thank you.